Can I begin by, when we talk about places where there are people speaking different languages, it's very often discussed in the way I think you've described it, Haseeb, as a challenge, as a resource issue. So when we say in Leicester we have so many languages spoken in our schools here, it's very often in the context of we need resource, that it's a difficulty that we have to face and we need more resources to deal with it. Why should we value people speaking different languages in places like this? How can we talk about it differently as a positive for a place like Leicester?
Are you asking me?
We'll start with Martin. He's been sitting here waiting patiently.
Well, one of the way to put it of the value, because usually when you talk about value, and that's one of the problems we have always to score the circle of money and income and prove that that will bring somehow a profit in any way to any parties involved. So one of the things is it is been shown that it is highly costing to the UK economy the fact that we don't have language skills. So just from the economical point of view, I even say that it was about 48 billions a year. Even if you halve it twice, to a quarter of that money a year is a lot of money. So from that perspective, which tends to bring help to business people and to understand that, is that it's costing to the UK economy the fact that we don't speak other foreign languages and we are not able to engage with other countries and with people from different cultures. So that's what would be one of the things that could be helpful to say.
Marina, how about you? Why should we value different languages in places like this?
So I think, especially in our case, it's a matter of identity. So for the children to know both languages, English and Greek, or even the Cypriot dialect, it's what defines them. So knowing a language is a trait of who you are. So knowing a language, it's not only knowing how to structure sentences, because it's, like you said, it's a whole culture behind the language. So it shows a country's culture, its traditions, even the humor of the people living in that country. So for a child to be able to speak more than one languages it can be a huge asset in developing his personality and his character and knowing who he is.
Okay. Haseeb, what about you?
I think I would agree with that. I was brought up to speak two different languages myself. I think it's a fact of life. We live in a global society. I think that having a city which has a richness of different languages brings with it a richness of culture, arts, vibrancy, which for me is something to be celebrated. It's a real asset. I've always thought diversity is an asset. It's a fact. Inclusion is a choice, as far as I'm concerned.
So, let's see if we can find somebody in the audience with a question.
I don't have a question, but I've got a comment relating to what you were just saying about valuing multilingualism, which already exists. So this summer I did a project on the Golden Mile area of Leicester, looking at the linguistic landscape and the presence of Gujarati, and I was really I was talked to the police as part of this project, and the police are really value local multilingualism. It was very interesting to see, for example, the posters that they're using in the community to communicate with sections of the community that don't speak English. So they have posters up warning people of specific crimes that are targeting specific groups. And when I asked if they use translation services, they said no, we use people within the force, and there's a real sense of value in the multilingualism which is already in the force, compared to, for example, the council who bring people in. So I think that some organisations are valuing the existing multilinguals. I think that's something, obviously in some cases, such as in the hospital, then it's important that you have somebody who is a specially qualified linguist and interpreter. I think in some services that it does exist.
And just on that point, Haseeb, does that mean if you go into a Leicester hospital, they can deal with virtually any language that a patient comes in with?
We're getting better. As I said, the service started up in February, so there is an element that actually the service itself is based in Manchester, but they recruit local interpreters, and where we cannot get or source anyone that's local, they will use telephone interpreting. I think that the fill rate is around about 98%. So 98% of requests get filled in terms of the variety of languages that are requested. So that's very good. But there will be occasions when it doesn't happen for whatever reason. But matters are always resolved.
Okay, who else has got a question? Comment? Something to say? Yeah, go ahead.
So thank you very much for your talks. I found it very interesting and fascinating from a personal perspective and also from an academic perspective. I mean, personally, I'm half Greek, half English, so I grew up speaking English and Greek. So English to my mum, Greek to my dad.
Did you go to supplementary school?
I did. I grew up in Greece, so I grew up in Athens. But I went to an international school, just to complicate things even further. So yeah, from a personal perspective, I find the issue of language interesting, but also complex and difficult as well in terms of negotiating that within the family. But in terms of my sort of academic research, I found that, and I've done research on the Greek diaspora in Australia, and in my research there, I found that kind of language, was something that kind of that people disagreed about. So I guess my question is how important, is language for an identity? And the reason that I say that is because I spoke to people who didn't speak Greek very well at all, but they still felt Greek, and they still felt they should be seen as Greek, even though they didn't really. I mean, I spoke Greek better than them, in many cases, which was a little bit, bizarre because I'm kind of half Greek, and my identity is very hybrid and kind of in between. But they very much saw themselves as kind of Greek, Greek homeland, Greek Australian, and the Greekness was very strong in them in terms of their sense of belonging. But language wasn't really present, particularly for younger children who didn't necessarily speak it, in the home, and their parents, who perhaps were both Greek, didn't actually speak Greek to them at all. So I find that issue quite interesting, and there are other people in the community who found that really problematic. So it was an interesting, dilemma. So yeah, and I heard the whole point of this is kind of, language, identity, belonging. So I guess it would be good if the panelists were able to expand, more on the kind of complexities, if you like.
Well, that point about, Marina, I guess you're the best person to start with, that point about how central is language for identity, heritage, belonging. It sounds to me like your school is conducted in Greek. Is that right? Yes. So would you take people with a Greek heritage who don't speak Greek, but they're just interested in the culture and heritage, or speak Greek not very well?
Yes, we actually do have students who their only contact with the language is at the school, as like what you said. So at home they might not speak Greek at all, even if their parents are from Greece or Cyprus. They might be second generation immigrants, so they feel that Greek is not the first language they would use. So it's easier, let's say, for them to use English at home. So for that child, he or she only hears and uses the language while being at our school. So yes, we do have children who are not fluent in Greek, and English is their mother tongue, but they still feel the Greekness. So they still feel that, and that's why they are coming to us, because to them, language, it is important. Yes, there are other members of the community who feel that even if they do not use the language, they're still Greek, and you cannot deny that. You cannot take that away from them, of course. But if you're asking for my personal opinion, I think language is and it's a different avenue in getting to know your origins and your country and the people of your country. Yes, you can feel there are other commonalities as well, but to me language is a very central part of a culture and of a nation. So I'm not underestimating everything else. So maybe they know Greek dances or they are listening to Greek music even if they don't know what the song is talking about. But it will be a benefit for them if they knew the language as well.
Okay, what do you think, Martin? You're nodding too.
Well, but we have a case here which is in Arabic. We have to do an Arabic beginners course for anybody that would like to know the language, but we have an Arabic course which is given to people who know how to read Arabic. And because they learn to read Arabic usually because they learn how to recite the Quran, because they're Muslims. When you look at the background of all these students, these are all students who come from an Arabic background family, so they are first generation of British-born children. Their families talk to them mostly in English, so they could fit in within the British society. So the mother tongue basically is English, with a few words here and there in Arabic. And they feel that now they want to, well, yes, I can recite, I can speak a few words, but I'm not able maybe to write, read, and communicate properly. And they come to us, and for them it's a way to actually to get that part in contact with the culture, to be able to actually speak the language that is part of the culture.
Can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I've got personal experience as well. I've got 2 children who are bilingual, go to Marina school. The oldest one anyway, but I'll be sending the youngest one next year. I can agree with that because I think language is the door to the culture, and even though they experience the culture, the language helps them understand it more. Because I see my kids speak Greek at home, so we speak to them Greek. So my husband and I completely refuse speaking to them English because, hey, it's not who we are. We were born, I'm from Cyprus, my husband is from Greece. So speaking in English would be something very foreign to us. And we always insisted that they understand the language a lot and the culture that their parents come from before they think that English is their language. And they learn English at school and they speak English fluently, even better than Greek now. But I sense quite a lot from my oldest son especially that through language he can understand the culture, he can understand body language, he can understand humour, that if he didn't know the language or he didn't know the phrases in Greek, he just wouldn't get. And that comes from playing ballet with children, listening to their grandparents talking, and it's the door to a culture. So being part of the culture and not speak language, I think you're losing something. You're missing important elements of the culture.
How old are your kids, can I ask?
My oldest is 7.
7.
Yeah.
And what do they feel about this? What do they feel about talking to you in Greek and going to a school that teaches Greek? Do they value it? Do they feel strongly about it?
Yeah. My son loves it. He absolutely loves it because even though he speaks to his friends in school, I think he's very lucky living in Leicester and going to a school where about 90% of the students are from different cultures, mostly Asian cultures. His best friends speak Gujarati at home or different other languages. But I think he values it a lot because then when he goes back to Cyprus or Greece, he can get it. He can understand. His grandparents can speak fluently with his friends. Well, he loves being there anyway for holidays and the weather. But I think they value it. And because all of his friends are bilingual, at least bilingual, it's just, I think they consider it as an asset. Or he considers it as something that it's normal, at least normal, because all of his friends do it.
all of his students have have English and then another language at home. So it's something very natural, very at ease with.
And can I add something to
Yeah,
it?
sure.
I think it feels natural because the parents are also using it. So, for example, when I was learning English when I was in Cyprus, when I went back home, I wouldn't use it because my parents wouldn't start speaking to me in English, and so I wouldn't start using the language out of the context of the lessons. So it's really helpful if the language is spoken at home. That's how parents can support their child in using it and in making the child feel that it's a natural process. They don't even realize, they just switch from one language to another so easily and so quickly. It's like so automatic to them if they use it at home as well.
It's interesting. I mean, of course, I guess, I assume that most of the young people here who have access to more than one language are from the subcontinent. Their parents are from the subcontinent, so they're Gujarati or Punjabi or other South Asian speakers. And I know there is some research about young people who speak those languages, and they resist those languages because they argue these are the languages of the village, of the past, of the old place. And we're in the new place now, and so this is where we want to be, and this is how we want to speak to our friends and others. You guys clearly don't feel that at all in wanting to learn Greek and wanting your children to be part of both cultures.
Oh, of course not. I wouldn't feel that because it's my mother tongue. So, and it's also my culture, my life history, who I am. Even though I've been here many years, I've been in the UK like half of my adult life. It's who I am is defined by my experiences as a child and growing up, and my family, and that's Greek Cypriot.
I think it depends a lot on the relationship between the parents and the culture and language. So, you know, if you've got parents who are coming to the UK because they do want a fresh start, because they want a break from where they've come from, well, clearly from speaking to you, you can hear straight away that you're very proud and you want to keep the link. So I think that it's a really complex relationship.
I think, go on.
Yeah. So there's 2 points I want to say, sort of now just on the back of what you said. I think a lot of that, what you're saying is very true, is down to the parents. I think also there is sort of a history of colonialism that we need to look at there, because I think one of the reasons why perhaps, Johnny, it's almost like you were in my head, because that's sort of the point I wanted to make about not the reluctance.
I am in your head all the time.
The reluctance to sort of want to speak those languages from the subcontinent. I think part of it comes from this idea of, you know, the colonialism and the cultural colonialism that's now sort of spread over and come into the language. But B, another part, I think, of what the question I wanted to ask maybe to the panel was that what sort of role do you think institutions or schools and so on play in sort of demystifying this foreignness of languages from the subcontinent, or, you know, for example, Gujarati, Punjabi, Arabic, Somali, Polish? I mean, do schools have a larger role to play in perhaps teaching those in the curriculum, which will then therefore take away this aspect of not wanting to speak that language and keep it going in the family? I mean, I'm also multilingual. I speak English, Gujarati, Urdu, and I'm also learning Arabic. But I must say, growing up, I was also reluctant to speak Gujarati because it's sort of, you associate it with this backwardness, and it's only when you sort of come to disassociate that. And perhaps one of the reasons why there's much more pride in Greek identity is because it does have that Anglo vibe to it, you know? It's the Greek, the French, the Spanish, the German. So I guess my question is, what role do you think perhaps institutions have to play in that?
Can I start?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think, as the previous speaker said, I think the issues are actually very complex, and I think that it is about how people feel about it at the end of the day. I'll just give you a very, very quick sort of insight into my sort of experience, where my father actually was a teacher, and he spoke to us in English. My mother couldn't speak English very well, still can't actually, so I converse with her in very broken Urdu. And the reason I don't know Punjabi is because they use that as a code between themselves to cut us out of conversations. So whilst they were very proud culturally, they used it as a, would ask, what does that mean? And I say, you'll find out when you grow up. We never did find out when we grew up. And then for us, for me personally, it wasn't really an issue of it not being something which we thought would hold us back. It was more a practical fact of life that we were able to speak English much more fluently. Now, I went to public school for 2 years as well, up in Wolverhampton, where all I spoke for 2 years was English. So, and my brothers have had a slightly different experience. I've got 2 younger brothers, 12, 15 years younger than me, who spent a few years in Pakistan because my parents realised that actually we didn't speak very good English. They wanted them to fit in much better within their Pakistani culture, so they spent a few years in Pakistan, and they can speak Punjabi very fluently, but they don't speak it now, predominantly, because they don't see it as being relevant. Role of schools, in terms of going back to your question, I think as long as there's choice involved, I think they can play a part, I think, in terms of helping children who want to actually learn a language which fits in with their culture and helps them to, I suppose, understand the language, which does contribute, I think, to one's identity. As long as they're not forced to do it, I think that the question is, how much pressure do they have, parental pressure and pressure from the community, to learn something which, at the end of the day, I mean, I spent many a weekend. If John doesn't mind, I'm going to mention, I have an autobiography about how I lost my sight. But in it, I talk a lot about the years I spent in my early infancy in Pakistan, and being made to go to mosque every weekend, which I hated. So I used to wait until mum and dad or aunt and uncle dropped us off, and then I'd go skipping down the shops on Streatham High Street, do a lot of window shopping at the time when I had my sight, and then went back to mosque to be picked up at the end of the day. We got caught eventually. but this is the interesting part of one's own personal experience and that sense of belonging. Now, I just happened to work at the city council actually, and I was involved massively in the community cohesion agenda when that first came out after the 2001 riots in Bradford, Oldham and Burnley. Some of you will remember this. And there was a massive question about, the Pakistani community integrated into British society, or are they living parallel lives? And this all goes back to, and I think it is different, I've got to be honest with you, I do think it's different for Muslim Pakistani communities. I've got a colleague I work with who's actually Gujarati Muslim, and I said that I do think the cultures are different, the sense of belonging is different. I think if you've come over from, say, Greece or Cyprus, you know, and you've got an excellent command of the language, you're proud of your culture, and you want to send your children to learn the language and the culture, I think it is slightly different, if I may say so, my view, to my parents' generation who came over to the UK, who settled down, they came over for economic reasons, and they wanted to hold on to something back from Pakistan. A culture and identity which now no longer exists, funnily enough. They go back and it's a very different country, they can't live there now. Sorry, John, bit of a convoluted answer to that.
Schools. Who wants to comment on schools?
Well, I could go to schools. My wife is a primary school teacher.
Oh, so is mine.
My mother-in-law works as a school teacher. My father-in-law also was a governor and another school teacher, primary school teacher, so I know the subject. So I will have to put more pressure onto teachers, because they already have a lot of pressure from all parts of society. They have to do parenting, they have to raise our children, so they have to behave and teach them all sorts of subjects in, I don't know, 5 hours a day. But they have a very important role in terms of tearing down some myths and some ideas about other cultures. The fact is, when they bring anything related to other cultures through songs, through stories, children embrace that. And one example is my daughter. I have 3 children. My daughter is 5, and for her, I always speak to her in Spanish, and mom speaks to her in English, and she mostly speaks Spanish, but she's making an effort to speak more Spanish more and more. But one example was that when in her final year in preschool, they started to do some songs. One of the teachers asked me, can we do something in Spanish? So I brought them a small song in Spanish to do with the letters. And she took ownership of that. So she was teaching all her classmates the song, and she was correcting them and so on. And in the case of, for all the children, it was a good experience of learning about the language. They were able to sing that. But for my daughter, it was a matter of pride there, that, okay, I'm able to teach them about a culture that is part of me, and she's just starting to learn about that and to discover. So yes, school have a big part to play, but they will need especially support of everybody in the society, especially because they need money, they don't have the resources they need, and also because we need to tell all this myth that people have to be taught English and math, English and math, English and math, and there are other subjects, and actually learning languages can help you to be better at math and better at English.
We also, I mean, there is so much research, I'm afraid, about the way in which people, maybe again, particularly people from South Asian cultures, hold on so strongly to their heritage, and it's identified immediately, for example, in their names, how easily discriminated they are when they prize their background and they prize their language and hold on to it. And parents, I think, see this and sometimes resist schools trying to continue this heritage, because parents think, simply by doing this sometimes, this is what my wife told me, that sometimes parents in a school where she was teaching the overwhelmingly Muslim school, primary school, the parents, lots of parents didn't want their children to be taught about the past, because they felt it was going to be a disadvantage for them. Further on, they felt they were going to be discriminated against. They knew that this was the kind of thing that happened to them, and they feared it was going to happen to their children. So it is very complicated. And you know, again, from a personal story, for all of this kind of anxiety or this public kind of discussion about faith and education, particularly around Muslims, she taught at a Muslim school where faith hardly intervened at all in the teaching in the school. And she moved to a Catholic school, and it was everywhere, including them going as part of school time to the local Catholic church, which they never would do in the Muslim school as part of the school day. So she said it was rather ironic that there were all these anxieties about Muslim kids and how they're being taught about Muslim issues in school. It was much more powerful and central to the Roman Catholic school that she spoke to, that she taught at. She's not a Catholic and she's not religious at all. It just struck her as being really odd that those anxieties was focused in those ways.